Roman Travers, Magic Talk.
Well, back at the beginning of this week on the 4th of January, over 75 children and teens with Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis from all over New Zealand began arriving at Camp Carry in Waitakere, Auckland. They attended the 7th annual 6-day camp for children with these diseases. The camp is known as Camp Purple Live and was the creative genius of Dr. Richard Stein, a gastroenterologist from the Wellington region. There are others involved too, making this camp a huge success, like Professor Andrew Day, a paediatric gastroenterologist from Christchurch. And both of these gentlemen are no doubt very tired now, but they made the time to join me here on Summer Mornings. A good morning to you both.
Good morning, Roman.
Morning. Good to have you along. Now, Andrew, first to you. Let's get this underway by defining what is Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis.
So Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis are both grouped together as the term inflammatory bowel diseases, and they're conditions that can begin at any age, right through the whole age spectrum, where there's inflammation, swelling, redness, ulceration on the surface of the bowel. And the two names depict that there's differences between those sort of types of where things are involved. And these are chronic, incurable conditions that can lead to diarrhea, pain, not growing, and in children can disrupt school and usual social activities. So there's a number of different therapies that we have, but none of them cure the conditions. And many of these children go through all sorts of traumas and difficulties, which is why the camp is so important for them.
Okay, that's really good. Thank you for that. Now, Richard, to you, and it's been years since you and I have spoken. It's really good to have you along. How do these diseases present in children or adults? Do they creep up on you, or are they pretty obvious?
It depends who you're speaking to. If someone presents to a gastroenterologist initially, they might recognize the symptoms right away. But one of the problems is that the symptoms, which can be abdominal pain and diarrhea, sometimes blood in the stool, occasionally when people present, say, to their GP, they can go even years without being diagnosed, or maybe they're diagnosed, particularly in children, with maybe anxiety about school. But one of the main problems with this disease is people can go months, even years, without a good diagnosis before they can actually start on treatment.
Okay. So these diseases affect the intestinal tract, and when symptoms cannot be controlled with medications funded here in New Zealand, repeated hospitals and surgeries often follow. What's the impact, particularly on children, Andrew? Because adults we can tough it out to a certain extent, but this must be very hard for children, Andrew.
Well, the things we worry about is how these conditions interfere with children's growth in terms of gaining weight, but also getting taller. Things like that we take for granted in our children in terms of getting into puberty, getting to school, being able to attend social activities and mixing with friends, doing sports. All of these things can be compromised. So some of these children have health school in terms of not being able to get to ordinary school, or not being able to partake in other social activities and sporting activities, all of which can impact upon that child's, how they interact with the world, how they develop. All of those things are key and important things in our kids, and these conditions interfere with various parts of that.
Okay. Let's look specifically at the camp. Any child, well, I think most children love going on camps. It's always a bit more difficult with a medical condition for some, I guess. But you had some wonderful people turning up, the MPs like David Seymour, Brooke Van Velden, Chris Bishop and more. They visited apparently to learn more about the challenges faced by the children. How beneficial was that visit from your point of view, Richard, having those politicians turn up?
I think having an interest by people in government who actually control the purse strings, for funding of medications that we need in this country, awareness among the MPs is critical. And one of our, one of our biggest challenges is getting people in government to recognize that what we have funded in New Zealand to treat people with these diseases is very, very lacking, especially compared with other countries. We're years behind what we have to offer, particularly these children.
Richard, you've come from the US, you've come from Seattle where you had a big private practice years ago. How frustrating is that for you, knowing that you could be using better medications?
Well, I mean, it goes without saying that when you're sitting across the desk with a young person and you say that you've exhausted all your options, nothing's working, and we have to unfortunately make a referral to a surgeon to undergo, a surgery which might involve a permanent ostomy bag. Knowing that there are other medications available in other countries that they're just not funded here. It just wrenches at your heart.
Yeah, I bet it does too.
Very frustrating.
Well, for you and for the patients, absolutely. How do you motivate the children to attend these camps without making them feel like they're with a bunch of sick people, Andrew?
Well, one of the key things that we emphasise in the camps that this helps to normalise the condition. So the other 78 campers that are there with them all have the same condition, varying severities. Most of the volunteers have the same condition as well. So, I mean, we're not talking IBD 24 hours a day, but they're mixing and matching with kids all in the same boat, all facing the same condition. I remember many years ago talking to a patient who'd said that the only time they'd ever met anyone with inflammatory bowel disease was when they looked in the mirror. And that for me was a very scary comment. But that's one of the big things about the camp in terms of it normalises things for these kids. They don't have to worry about what someone might say about tummy pain or diarrhea or whatever. And so yesterday when the campers left, there were 78 really happy campers. They were all tired like us. But the benefits that they get from the camp go way beyond just this week. And they keep in touch with the other campers over time. They've made these connections that last and last.
Andrew, just quickly going to the name of the camp, why is it called Camp Purple Live?
So purple's the colour that's linked in or associated with inflammatory bowel disease. I think the initial, when the camp was initially developed, that was one of the names that came up, and it was linked in with an organisation that was contributing to the initial camp.
Yep. Okay.
And that's just the name that we've stuck with. So purple ties in with IBD in particular.
Well, it's quite nice actually for children not to have some sort of horrible big word up. It's a nicer take on what could be used as a name, and it's something cool for them to attach themselves to. Richard, how much of Crohn's and ulcerative colitis is familial, and how much is exacerbated by diet?
Surprisingly, diet, while it can exacerbate symptoms, it's unlikely to be a major factor in why people actually get the disease. It seems to be, though, a combination of the genetic predisposition to getting these diseases, probably coupled with something in the environment that triggers it. For instance, if you had identical twins, the chance of that identical twin getting Crohn's disease if their sibling has the disease is much, much greater, although there are identical twins where one might have it and the other might not. So There's probably something in the environment that triggers the genetic predisposition.
Okay. All right. If you just joined me, I'm speaking with Dr. Richard Stein and Professor Andrew Day, both gastroenterologists, with Andrew being involved specifically with the paediatric aspect. Over 20,000 New Zealanders have inflammatory bowel disease, or IBD. New Zealand has the third highest IBD rate in the world. Why is that, Andrew?
So to be fair, we don't know exactly. We know that, as Richard was saying, the genetic influences are really important. and they seem to be particularly important in the Pākehā populations within New Zealand, and IBD is much less common in Maori and Pacifica. We know also that IBD appears to be more common the further south we go in New Zealand, and perhaps sunlight and vitamin D exposure is important. That same pattern's been observed in Europe as well in terms of the distance away from the equator. There's lots that we don't know. As Richard was saying, we have that sort of working idea about the key aspects, but we don't know exactly why the rates are higher in New Zealand.
Yeah, it's quite confronting, and thankfully we've got good people like you involved doing the work. So how does anyone who might be interested in next year's Camp Purple Live find out more? I'll stick with you at the moment, Andrew.
So on the Crohn's and Colitis New Zealand website, there's a page that's devoted to the camp, and anyone can look at that website and look at that page. There's a video that was made from a camp 3 years ago in Auckland, but there's buttons to click in terms of contacting the camp administration, contacting us, and then can express interest. And even during the camp, somebody new had emailed us in terms of, we want to try and help for the camp next year, what do we do?
Okay.
So we're certainly very keen to hear from new people. It's always good to have new people involved, as well as people that have been involved over time. So reach out via the website or directly to us is perfectly fine.
Well, it's been a 6-day camp, and no doubt, I know what it's like when you're around children who've got tons of energy. No doubt you're both pretty exhausted. Richard and Andrew, thank you so much for your time this morning, and well done for the good work that you're doing.
And Roman,
thank you very much.
Mention one thing?
Yes, of course.
Can I mention one more thing?
Yeah.
I want to point out that the camp is provided entirely free to campers. We didn't want finances to be any impediment to people or to kids attending the camp. Airfare, the cost of the camp, it's all free, and they just need to contact us. They can get the information on our website, crohnsandcolitis.org.nz.
crohnsandcolitis.org.nz. Thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure catching up with you both.
Thank you. Good morning.
Yeah, cheers. Thank you both.
Roman Travers, Magic Talk.
Well, there we go. There's so much that's not known and so much that is known. It seems like a really interesting area. 20,000 of us here in New Zealand have IBD, and we've got the third highest rate in the world. Why? Well, we don't really know anymore, do we? It's an interesting area. Dr. Richard Stein there, very quietly spoken, very humble man, doing a lot of good work. Well, they both are, but I know Richard Stein from years ago.